Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be drawing an illustration from my favorite Ghibli movie, one of my all-time favorite movies generally, honestly, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. But this video also happens to be a final project for a class, so get ready for me to sound kind of insufferable as I analyze media and how it reflects our lives today. I'll explain more about the project in a second, but for now, let's just get into the speed paint. So yes, I'm drawing a Nausicaa illustration today, and I chose Nausicaa in particular because I wanted to talk about a central theme of the film, which is the interaction between humans and the natural environment. Before I go further into the analysis, however, I'll give a brief summary of the movie, and if you haven't seen it yet, stop this video, please, and just go watch it. But I'm not giving you a spoiler warning because it was made in 1984, so you've had plenty of time. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a Studio Ghibli film that centers on a post-apocalyptic land which, 1,000 years before the events of the movie, was destroyed in the 7 Days of Fire by these giant robots called God Warriors. This catastrophic event essentially irradiated the entire planet, turning most of it into desert and the rest into a continuously spreading jungle which is toxic to humans. The story centers around Nausicaa as she fights to protect her home from being drawn into a war between two other human factions, the Tolmekians and the Pegites, all the while seeking to remediate humanity's relationship with the toxic jungle. The Tolmekians and the Pegites are fighting for territory as their homes are slowly being subsumed by the ever-growing jungle. While invading Nausicaa's home, which is called the Valley of the Wind, the Tolmekians find an intact God Warrior and create a plan to fix it up and use it for two purposes. One, of course, domination of the human race, and two, also of course, total destruction of the toxic jungle. Little do they know, and in fact Nausicaa is the only one who's discovered this, that the toxic jungle is actually cleaning the earth of radiation rather than making it worse. It only seems worse to the humans because they can't live in it. As this is happening, the Pegites have lured out these gigantic bugs called the Ohm, which I'm currently drawing right now as you can see, from the jungle and driven them into a stampede across the desert. As they stampede, they destroy every human civilization they come across and also spread the jungle because of the spores they carry on their bodies. Naturally, no one is happy about any of these situations. Not the Ohm, not the Pegites, not the Tolmekians, and certainly not Nausicaa. And the film ends with Nausicaa stopping the stampede, thereby returning the Ohm to their jungle homes, and the God Warrior being destroyed. So throughout the story we have two central themes: warring human factions, that's one, and the relationship between humans and the natural environment, that's the second. Every time I watch this film, I'm always struck by how uncooperative everyone outside of the Valley of the Wind is, despite what should be an obvious threat to humanity as a whole. This film is kind of a lesson in frustration for me. No one seems to be able to get along with each other, and the only one who is actually addressing the problem at its heart is Nausicaa. Because Nausicaa is the only one actually trying to understand the toxic jungle, which is the cause for human conflict in the first place. It's also frustrating because all of this entire situation, is basically humanity's fault. Here's how. Thousands of years ago, humanity industrializes to the extent that they could build crazy tech. So they build, of course, weapons of mass destruction, the God Warriors. The God Warriors then do exactly what they're built for, mass destruction, and create a poisonous world in the process. Humanity is shunted back into a pre-industrial agrarian society. That society progresses and discovered, you guess it, another God Warrior. And if not for Nausicaa, the cycle would continue again and again, all the while with the Earth suffering the effects. Now, you might be asking yourself, what does this desert, sci-fi, bug-filled, poisonous landscape have to do with our good, green, slightly less bug-filled and desert-filled Earth? Here's where things get real, maybe too real, so if you're a highly anxious person or sensitive to conversations about climate change, industrialization, and the Earth just being really fucked up by humans, you probably shouldn't watch the rest of this video. If you're a climate change denier, leave! And please do not ever come back, I do not want you here. So with that out of the way, I'm now going to drag the themes of Nausicaa kicking and screaming right into the real world and our real problems, because what we see playing out in Nausicaa is, unfortunately, a pretty good depiction of what is happening today and has been happening for at least the past 150 years. Now, because I'm a Japanese major, I'm going to use examples from Japanese history, but just know that the events and patterns I'm about to describe definitely have siblings or at least cousins elsewhere in the world. Let's start in 1868, as described by Robert Stolz in his book Bad Water, Nature, Pollution, and Politics in Japan, 1870 to 1950. I'll have a work cited for my commentary down below, by the way, in case anyone wants to take a longer look. The introduction, which is titled Nothing to Fear Here, begins with, quote, "In the 8th lunar month of 1868, amid the collapse of the Tokugawa samurai government, even as civil war raged in the north, a pamphlet appeared in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, assuring readers that Benjamin Franklin has made them safer," unquote. It's an interesting way to start the introduction, with the contrast between war and societal collapse against Benjamin Franklin's alleged safety. Stoll goes on to explain how Franklin's invention of the lightning rod recontextualized lightning as something that can be controlled and dominated by humans rather than a form of divine punishment. So yeah, Benjamin Franklin learns how to keep himself from getting struck by lightning. Sounds good, right? And it is, because you can protect yourself and your family from dying via lightning. But after lightning, what if Benjamin Franklin, or his student, or someone generations down the line turned his attention towards water, and then towards trees and animals, and the chemical makeup of trees and animals, and eventually you're looking at a really corrupted world from the one you originally started in. This, at least to me, is the process that humanity has started on, and whose end result is depicted in Nausicaa. This is our world, where our landscape has been twisted to the every whim of humanity, even if those whims are based in greed rather than practicality or safety, and now the Earth is trying to twist back. Let's skip to 2011, then, for an example of how humanity's domination of and rhetorical separation from the Earth can lead to devastation. I'm talking about the Fukushima triple disasters on March 11th, 2011. On Friday, March 11th, 2011, a 9.0 on the moment magnitude scale earthquake struck off the coast of the Tohoku region and produced a tsunami which hit the coast of Fukushima Prefecture, clearing the seawalls and flooding the Daiichi nuclear power plant in Okuma, Fukushima. The tsunami caused an electrical failure and damaged backup energy sources responsible for cooling the nuclear reactors at the plant. The reactors exploded the next day at around 3:30 p.m., spreading radiation across the prefecture and southward. What followed was a mass evacuation of homes near the plant, homes which had already been devastated by the earthquake and tsunami near the power plant, homes that people would not be able to return to until at least 6 years later, homes that, although the government has said it's okay to live in now, are still irradiated. The possibility for thyroid cancer is exponentially higher in this area than anywhere else in Japan, and it's not a coincidence. People died in the immediate disaster, and 14 years later continued to be affected by the radiation, all because TEPCO officials, that's the people responsible for the plant and its location in Fukushima, wanted nuclear power even if it meant putting it in a location known to be geologically unstable. If you'd like to know more about Fukushima and the residents who chose to stay or couldn't evacuate, I would really recommend watching Kamanaka Hitomi's documentary called Little Voices from Fukushima. I can't really articulate the whole of 311 in a short video like this, so if you're interested, please go watch that. I'll link it down below as well. Since Nausicaa was made in 1984, Miyazaki was likely referring to radiation contamination with the dropping of the atomic bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima rather than 311, but I think pulling 311 into my analysis is a very unfortunate but apt parallel to the reuse of the God Warriors in the film. If we think of the God Warriors as a metaphor for nuclear power and its capacity for destruction, then the 7 Days of Fire equates to the atomic bombings in 1945, and the Tolmekians' revitalization of the God Warrior in the story as an event akin to 311 if the God Warriors were not destroyed at the end of the story. That might be the difference between Nausicaa and our world, that the cycle is broken in Nausicaa, whereas the real world continues to engage with technologies that, if misused, can seriously mess up the Earth and the people living on it. I think the worst part is knowing that it's our fault. Not to say that I supported the location of the Daiichi plant where it was, or had any part in its building or its destruction. No, I mean our as in humanity's collective fault. And I think it's impossible to not be complicit in this blame because we use energy to light our homes and power our computers to make videos like this one, And maybe the energy comes from a nuclear power plant, but we just don't know it. So while we might not know it, we are still giving legitimacy to the prevailing systems which allow for the events like 311 to coalesce. I don't really know where you draw the line on a thread of reasoning like this, to be honest, and for me it's really depressing to think about, so I'll probably just leave that example there. Can you tell that I have really complicated and hard to articulate feelings about modern society and technology? Yeah. The point is, though, that industrial society has a history of using the Earth to achieve its own ends, and although people undeniably do benefit from these changes, the net result is a less diverse, less stable Earth because we do not use these technologies responsibly. If we don't get our shit together, if governments and people in power don't start getting serious about climate change and industries don't start caring about environmental regulations, maybe an event very similar to the 7 Days of Fire in Nausicaa is in our future. And although I'm not really making this video about what I'm about to say, I do still think it's worth pointing out that people do not benefit from industrialization equally. In fact, with our, and by our I mean America, because I'm an American, but by our history of imperialism and resource extraction from other countries, there are communities which actively suffer from industrialization, and on top of that are left with a ravaged, basically unlivable landscape. So yeah, if humanity is going to be this uncooperative, then maybe it does, which is to say we do, deserve the toxic jungle, or at the very least have a toxic jungle in our future. And maybe we need a toxic jungle for us to realize that yes, things are really that bad, and if we don't deal with the way we're killing our Earth, the Earth is going to start killing us back. It already has. It's not going to get better until we do anything about it. Really, it would be nice if our world had a Nausicaa, a courageous protagonist who could set everything right all by herself, even if the problem is as large as our entire world. But our reality is different from the relative simplicity of a film, so if we want to change things, it's going to require a lot more than the actions of one girl. Before I go on to describing my process for this illustration and explaining my design elements, I want to talk about some miscellaneous facts I learned while doing research for this video that I thought were interesting but not necessarily relevant to the overall argument. The main topic is about how Nausicaa was originally localized/released in America in 1985. This is described by the piece Neutering the Monster, Pruning the Green by Nathaniel Bryant, by the way, which I've also linked down below, so do consider giving that a read if you're interested. But basically, when Nausicaa originally released in America, it was rebranded under the name Warriors of the Wind. All of the characters' names were changed, and the film was highly edited to align with quote-unquote more American themes. So the scene where Nausicaa is in her lab and discovers that the toxic jungle can be made non-harmful to human beings is cut out entirely, and the jungle is purposefully recontextualized as unknowable and ominous and something to be dominated rather than understood. Sound familiar? I hope it does because I've been talking about it for the last 15 minutes. Nausicaa herself, who is called Zandra in this version, emphasizes strength over empathy and is made to seem altogether more powerful, militaristic, and vengeful. As I've said, while not exactly relevant to my overall analysis, I thought this was a really interesting example of the American propaganda machine at work. And I've never really stopped to consider how even media like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind might be something altered before it even reaches international audiences. Finally, on a lighter note, I want to end this video by talking about the illustration itself. From a purely artistic standpoint, I wanted to work on a couple of things with this piece. One was drawing a fully fleshed out landscape with depth and color and texture and all that. And if you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that's not something I really do. Like maybe once or twice ever. Another thing I wanted to do was make this a quasi-palette challenge by primarily limiting myself to 5-ish colors and splitting those colors into back, mid, foreground. I ended up adding more variation as the piece goes on, but I started with a limited palette as a base, just as practice. From a design element standpoint, I knew from the very beginning I wanted to incorporate the jungle in as much detail as possible, with Nausicaa and an ohm in the jungle. I chose the colors to go from dark to light, with the lightest part being in the background, because it looks like the Ohm is closer to the outskirts of the jungle than Nausicaa, almost as if it's heading off to go spread the jungle even further, while in contrast, Nausicaa is situated deeper in the jungle, with her placement being a metaphor for her role in the film as the mediator between nature and humanity. To be super honest, I finished this illustration completely before writing the script for this video. I think this piece is kind of derivative, if that's the right word. Like, you could go on Pinterest and find 30 other pieces just like this without really trying. So although I'm really happy I tried something new and it turned out well, if I were to do this again, I would definitely try to alter the piece to sort of fit into the themes better that I've been talking about this entire time. I think there's an overall lack of tension in this piece, which is fine because to me the jungle is really about harmony and cleansing power and revitalization, but I'd probably try to incorporate more of the conflicts that I've been talking about, maybe by including a god warrior, or the stampeding Ohm, or the fighting Pejite and Tolmekian soldiers. I don't want to be too negative on myself since I definitely wasn't able to draw something like this even a year ago, but those are just my thoughts if I were to do a project like this again. So yeah, that's the illustration and my commentary about Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, nature and its relationship with humanity, and the problems we face today. I know this was a bit different from my usual style of video, but I hope you liked it, or at the very least learned something new, and I hope to see you in my next video. Thanks for watching, and bye!